Welcome to Unity Talks, where the hiring experts of Dallas-based recruiting firm Unity Search engage in lively discussion with successful business leaders to dissect their careers and how they got to where they are today, the obstacles overcome to reach their success, and steps they've taken to stay at the top of their respective fields. So listen in as we provide you with the thought-provoking conversation and ideas that keep industries moving forward.
And welcome to another edition of the Unity Talks podcast. I'm your host, David Cathey, and we're so thankful that you showed up for us. It's rainy here right now in Dallas, and I just drove up from Houston, and so all things are great, including the guest that we have today. I had this guest referred to me by a previous guest on our podcast, and he was just like, you got to have him on the podcast. You got to let him tell a story and what his company does. And after a quick phone call, I realized that not only was the connection there for me, but I believe the connection is going to be there for those who are listening to his story and what his business can provide for you. So without further ado, Mark Mitford, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad that you're here. So glad you can kind of share. I want to start off by, we're going to give some publicity to your book. And then I would love to turn it over to you to kind of tell us a little bit of your quick story, who you are personally, professionally. So the publicity for the book here, you can see it's People Are Your Profit. Mark has a long background in human resources for companies that are your everyday companies. You would know all of them. And he's taken that a few years ago, back in 2013, and created his own company, HR Catalyst. So I'm not going to steal much more of the thunder. This is available on Amazon or anywhere that you want to buy a book and become educated. And I say HR, but it's more about HR, which you'll see. It's more about HR and it's about people. I mean, sometimes we take the human out of human resources. And Mark is putting, I think, the human back into human resources, and I'll let him go into that. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, great. Thanks, David. Thanks. Of course, thanks for having me today. So a little bit about me. I won't bore you with too many of the details, but a little, well, now they're going to be known secrets. So I was actually born in London, England, grew up in Canada.
Okay.
So London, England from birth until 7. From London, then over to the Great White North. So a place called Thunder Bay, Ontario, Northern Shore, Lake Superior.
Wow.
About 50 miles to the Minnesota border. Great in the summertime. This time of year is awesome. The wintertime, not so much.
I don't know that I could take it. It may be too much for me.
Yeah, it was, well, I remember, this is old school. So I remember walking to high school high school every day, but in the wintertime is you walk to school in the dark and you walk home in the dark because the sun would set about 3:30 or so.
Oh my gosh.
And so it got really weird and funky, but then of course then you get the flip, and this time of year when you're in June, July, it's great because then the sun would set about 11 p.m.
Yeah. Wow.
And then it'd be up around 5 or 4:30 or 5. Then
little
the sun's
cooler
starting to come up.
A
little bit cooler than here, just a smidge.
Okay.
Much bigger mosquitoes, which anybody from up north can attest to. The mosquitoes are like helicopters. You can hear them coming before they try to suck all your blood out. Professionally, high school through Canada, then moved down here, and undergrad at Baylor University. So Sick 'em Bears, anybody who's a Baylor Bear out there. Then I zipped down the road of 35 down to San Antonio for a grad degree in organizational psychology at St. Mary's.
Okay.
And then 1990, I started my professional career, I guess my quote-unquote real career, at Ericsson, when Ericsson used to be in Richardson, Texas, what used to be known as the Telecom Corridor. And great experience at Ericsson. Started off in the HR strategy world, which is a lot of what I do now. So, the cool thing was my business trip was to over Stockholm, Sweden. That was my business trip.
Oh, wow.
I'd be over there about 6 or 8 times a year. So that was kind of fun. Very similar latitude to, ironically, where I grew up in Canada.
Okay.
So very similar topography, weather, shrubs, even very weird. It's somewhat surreal.
Yeah.
But
I did go back in time.
Yes, very much so. But Corporately, I was in the corporate world, big companies, Ericsson, Texas Instruments, Nortel, Networks, PepsiCo. And then a little bit of a different twist. Then I dropped down in size into middle market size companies that were anywhere from 150 to about 1,500 employees. And that's where I had total responsibility for HR. And in each, there were 3 companies I did that for before I went out on my own. And ironically, each of those companies, I was the first strategic HR leader they had that actually sat in the big chair and reported to the owner or CEO of the company. So that was kind of that idea, ironically, about catalyst. That was a little bit of the catalyst to say, maybe there's an opportunity to be able to make a business doing this
Now,
professionally.
is that why, was that a catalyst, to use that word, why you went from these large Fortune 500 companies to a small company? Because you maybe thought, I'd like to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond where I can have more influence instead of, just a number at one of these large organizations?
Yeah, David, I wish I was that smart. So I wasn't. I got a recruit. I got a call from a headhunter,
Okay.
and the first one was fairly large. 1,500 people, 10 countries, and they didn't have a person doing anything strategically around people. And so then I did one of those, and once I had my ticket cut, so supposedly, or as so to speak, punched in that world, then I did another one, and then another one, in which was about 8 years and 3 different companies, and 2 of those were private equity backed, and they were being sold. And I didn't go with the sale because they had 2 of me, and that would have involved relocation, and I didn't want to do that to my family at that point in time. And the last one was a little bit dysfunctional. I say very openly, for anybody listening, know who you are as a person, know what your core values are as a person. And I guess the polite way to say is that my core values and the core values of the CEO and the company didn't align too well. So I decided I would have a conversation one day, a little heart to heart with the CEO. And then about a month or 2 later, I exited. And I wish I had a game plan and a strategy around HR Catalyst. I didn't. I'm a strong person of faith, and my wife was a stay-at-home mom for 18 years, and we had 2 kids getting ready to launch to college. And I said, "Hey, honey, this is going to be a great idea. Why don't I go out and start a business?" And she's like, "Okay." I'm sure she had a couple of moments of trepidation, but at the end of the day, she said, "All right. So what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? How are we going to make money?" I said, I don't know. And what does a corporate HR guy know about running a business? Very little, probably as much as some people know in their pinky finger. But, and my daughters were a junior and senior in high school, and they ironically both went to Baylor too. So it's
let's pick a more expensive school. All credit to Baylor, but
yeah,
not cheap.
No, not cheap by any means, and not less cheap now. So I would say, but
Yes.
anyway, long story short, I was highly motivated, and I gave myself a time clock. So I'd say anybody who's an entrepreneur out there, give yourself a safety net, but make sure you just build a network and surround yourself with good people. And I started to leverage my network. And then just one thing started to fall in place after another. And before you know it, I had some, lo and behold, clients who were actually paying. And I was pre-med at Baylor, so I understood pretty heavily what a catalyst was. So everybody said, "Oh, where would you come up with this cool name?" I said, "Well, I just came up, me, myself, and I sat there and came up with HR Catalyst." And so it's just, it's something, chemically that accelerates a process from point A to point B. It's just going to make it go quicker. And ideally, that's kind of the thrust of what we do at HR Catalyst. We're there to act as a fractional HR executive for smaller companies that are between 5 to 75 million in revenue that need help in creating and then implementing a people strategy.
Okay, so one quick pause here. Pre-med major. What happened? Was that by design, or
Yeah.
was that another one of those? I wish that I was that fortuitous in my decision making.
You know, I wish I was that fortuitous, David. No, I was not. I was slugged it through. I was in my junior year, still, pre-med, and then I had this one friendly class called organic chemistry showed up, and I enjoyed it so much the first time I decided to take it twice. So,
Okay. Well,
and even the second time, it wasn't like I got straight A's. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, that was maybe again, bing, bing, maybe God's telling me, it's probably this is not your thing because it's going to get harder and harder as you continue to go. And I said, I don't want to go to med school in Guatemala or something like that and learn Spanish. So I'm like, all right, nothing against Guatemala and med school's down there, but I probably don't want to go someplace else in some third world
Yeah.
country to go to med school because that's the only place I
Right.
could get in. So,
Yeah.
and I took one class in psychology
Okay.
and I took one class in business and I liked both of them.
Interesting.
So then I figured if I could mix business and psychology, maybe I could figure out how to make a couple of shekels
Yeah.
and actually put some bread on the table, so to speak. So,
Yeah, it's really good, Mark. The reason why I paused you there is we've had so many guests who sat in that chair. And, you have to it's almost like you're making a career decision at times at 18 years old.
right.
And my goodness, that seems so hard to do, and even harder now than what it was
Right.
years ago. And we're seeing so many times, I just wanted to pause for the listener to say, look, here is another person sitting in this chair that thought they were going to go one way, ended up going another direction, and they're still successful. And sometimes that happens in school. And sometimes that happens when for me, it was 5 years into my career of being in finance. And I decided, I don't think I want to sit with my nose in Excel all day long. I want to interact and help people. And sometimes it's 20 years or 30 years into someone's career. And so it's almost nowadays, I feel like we're going to see this accelerate a little bit more with all the new technology and different jobs showing up and different jobs going away, that it's not as much about job moves, but career shifts. I'm using those words purposefully. Job moves is I was at Texas Instruments and I went to PepsiCo, and by all intents and purposes, I still had the same job.
Right.
As opposed to a career shift where I was doing this one way in this field, and now I am doing something completely different in a different field, and I think we'll see that. So you saying that caused me to pause, because we've had so many people, and I just want to show that life is okay when you make a change.
Sure. And I didn't that was not, it was not calculated. It wasn't methodical, but it's a, to me, when I talk about with people to being in professionally in HR for over 30 years, I'm a big fan of saying, continue to put tools in your toolkit. And at the end of the year, I always put out a blog that says, if you think back, so if it's around, things wind down for the holidays and slow down a little bit for most people, hopefully, is think about what tools you've added to your toolkit this year. And if the answer is 0, that's not good because other people are passing you by. So if you haven't added at least one tool into your toolkit, or that tool could be you're starting to be more intentional about networking and expanding the people and just not just hanging out with your college friends all the time. Hang out with somebody who's older like me and pick my brain, because I'm always happy to meet people for lunch or coffee and just share a couple of nuggets of wisdom with them. And hopefully that'll make a difference maybe 20 years down the road for them.
That's so good. Adding tools to the toolkit. That's, I think I told you the other day, I say this all the time, so I'm going to quit saying my old man's book club. I'm in an old man's book club. And really the impetus was, you want to increase your net wealth, you increase your network, and you want to surround yourself where you are the least, you're not the smartest, you have the least amount of wisdom in the room, and just soak it up from others. And I was all in on
That's
the
awesome.
book club, because I want to surround myself with people like that. All right, you have a star model. This is one of your one-pagers. You have a star model that you created with HR Catalyst there are 5 points on a star, and culture is in the center of the star because an effective organization has culture at the center. Why don't we go through your star model? How do you take a customer through this star model? And we may not get through all 5 because as
No
you and I
worries.
found out, we can get carried away a little bit in chatting. So
Yeah, the star model, and again, I wish there was this moment where, this bright light came on in my eyeballs and said, "Here's the star model, Mark." It wasn't that grandiose, or it was really when I wanted to, because we focus on helping to build HR strategies for businesses. So if you take a typical client, let's say a $20 million client revenue-wise, and they have 75 employees, most of the time, 98% of the time, 90-something% of the time, their idea of HR is payroll, benefits. You hire some people, you fire some people hang out for a number of years and maybe retire from here. That's what HR is in their mind.
I would 100% agree with that.
So it's very transactional in focus, that it operates at about 100 feet off the ground. And so what I try to do is bring some level of thought leadership into the conversation. And the star model really helps me to articulate it, because a lot of people, of course, they're very visually oriented. So when I think about the 5 points of the star, and I'll just say them very quickly, but you have it right at the top. You have strategy. So you have strategy, structure, people, rewards, processes. And then to your point, what you articulated a minute ago, David, is that at the center of the star, you have culture. And when you're growing, when the company is looking at growing, whether they're growing internally or organically, or they're growing through acquisition, they need to have a people strategy within their business, because just about every organization, 50 to 75% of the cost structure of the organization is going to be people. And some companies, and of course some of them, maybe in heavy manufacturing, a few things, maybe a little debated, but most of them, that is where their major cost is. And what are they doing intentionally to have some method to the madness around their people? Most of them don't.
You said a growing company,
right?
But this would be growing or not growing,
or not growing, right? It could be. And one of the tipping points for them, or that catalyst to say, ding ding, they might have been growing 10 or 15% year over year.
Why not?
Right. And then all of a sudden, and they might start seeing, and it's not uncommon that as a company grows, the CEO or founder, it's like, I know everybody, I hired most of these people, I know their families, I know everything about them. And when that company goes from 20 people to 40 to 50 to 60, the CEO or founder typically can't say that anymore. Who's this guy? Oh yeah, they've been here for 3 months. I don't know who they are. What do they do? And so the culture that they might have very intentionally created from the get-go is now starting to feel a lot of tension or stress. And some people who might have been with the company since it was established may start leaving. And they may say, if they're asked through an exit interview, this isn't the company that I knew 5 years ago. This is changing. We're bringing in all these crazy young people who have all these interesting ideas. The stuff that used to work for us to help us grow no longer works for us, because there's something out there in the world called competition. And your culture, I know I always say this statement so much, but your culture is your only strategic differentiator. That's the only thing a company can replicate. Well, the biggest thing is you can typically, most products, you can find products. If you want to buy something from Pepsi, there are other soft drinks out there. There's other salty snacks. But what is making yours different or better than those snacks that are out there on the aisle? So when the mom's shopping in the grocery store, why are they picking up nacho cheese Doritos versus something else that's a non-Pepsi product?
Okay.
So I'd say the key thing with the culture is most companies, it's not just having some pretty words or a pretty vision or mission statements. It's really how does a company bring their culture to life? And I was doing some leadership training on Tuesday with a company, and I said, the guideposts for your culture are, to me, that they're really your core values. So words like integrity, words about customer focused, words about servant leadership. How do you live those out on a daily basis? How do you interview for those core value traits? Because you should interview for them, you should promote against them, you should also terminate people if they actually are not emulating those core values. So I would say when it comes down to operationally, your culture is something that people walk into a company and they will feel something different than another company they're possibly working for or interviewing with. So I would say, especially in your line of work, David, a lot of it is, tell me about your culture and how can we help you find people? Because typically that X factor, which is going to why a person may not, if you hire them, why a person may cycle out within 3 to 6 months, probably not a cultural fit.
Here's something that I'm sure you've seen this before that I've noticed more and more. Is it's the same company, it's two different people, but they feel differently about that company. One person's like, oh my gosh, I love this place. It's given me so much. This is the greatest. I love everybody here, on and on. And the other person's like, well, this wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. Why? Because we're humans, right? We all have different DNA. We all see different things through our own lens. And I feel like that could be really hard for an organization to create this culture, because I don't know that everybody will see the exact same thing that you want them to see.
Right.
Because they're different people. How can companies get better at that, knowing that they are individuals that make up the organization? Am I making sense? In my head, it makes perfect sense.
I know. No, it does. I think the key thing is, first of all, culture has to be very intentionally leadership led. And I think there has to be one of the biggest things that companies do very poorly across the board, doesn't matter if it's 50 people or 50,000 people, is communications. So I would say one of the biggest thing is having communications that are focused on the culture. Having communications that are focused on why should you work here? Because there are lots of case studies which say companies that sometimes they do not have to be the best pay, they don't have to have the best compensation, but their retention rate is through the roof. And why is that? Because chances are, because they have the type of culture that involves honesty, transparency, possibly they openly talk about their financials, there are things that drive the level of engagement. And of course, as you know well, the engagement level across U.S., just in totality, it's around 33%. And the engagement level in the U.S. has gone down since COVID. Every year it drops a percentage point. It's actually gone down now. And so there's a lot of course, we could spend another hour talking about some of the theories behind that. But engagement actually pretty methodically has gone down a point. It was about 36%, 37% right in 2020. So, and that's actually, it's continued to go down. It's not gone up.
Wow.
And so I'm not sure where the floor is. And one of the biggest drivers a lot of people say is hybrid remote work is one of the biggest drivers, which was a big push from COVID. But a lot of people who work remotely full time and who work work across the U.S., they're very detached. They work in their little bubble and they have their own little culture, whether it's good or bad. They kind of do their own thing. So I think there's reasons for it.
Okay.
And I think the other big thing is now with Gen Zs. I've got a chapter on some of the challenges around generations. I'm a young boomer, and a boomer thinks very differently and defines work very differently than a Gen Z does. And so how do you have this clash of generational differences when quite often you're going to have Gen X's and Boomers running companies, and then these crazy Gen Zs come in, and they want to tell you what their contract. They want to say, well, let me tell you why don't you tell me about why I should come to work for you?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute here, because I'm offering you a job.
Yeah.
Why else should you come to
Yeah.
work for me? Well, I want to know what else do I get out of this relationship?
Yeah.
And some people think they have three heads,
Yeah.
but they don't. They're just much more about they truly want to live the contract that we work to live.
That's right.
We don't live to work. And so we don't want to be tied here. And if the contract is 50 to 60 hours as the minimum, well, I'm going to say, see ya. I don't care how much you pay me.
And we've seen that. Yeah, we've absolutely seen that. And it's funny you said that, because they will tell you. Whereas, I'm Gen X, so I'm like, yes, sir, whatever you say, I'll do it. Oh, you want me to jump off that bridge? Okay, I'm going to go do it this half. That's how we were wired. We were just good soldiers. Took commands really well, went and did it. And,
Right, sure.
And now it's like, well, let me tell you how what you should do is this, and it's like, wait a minute, this is my company.
Right. I've got shoes older than you are. So what do you do? What are you doing? What are you telling me about what I should do, or how we can run this place better?
Yes. What's so interesting about that, though, is if you can train yourself to maintain a level of just be curious, be curious in all stages. Know that you can learn from someone else. My hope is that if I'm curious enough and I can demonstrate that I want to learn from other people, regardless of generation, sex, doesn't matter. I want to learn from other people, that other people will observe that in the organization and emulate that. And I'm by no means perfect, but I always had that going in my back of my head. Even in a conversation, I'm like, all right, David, just be curious right now. Just really, because I'm trying to train for myself to do that.
I think curiosity is great. I think, a big core value, which I discussed earlier this week, is around learning agility. Your ability to learn quickly. And also goes back to, that's probably correlated to curiosity. You're always like, I need to learn more about AI. Probably a very timely example. Yeah. I am not an AI phenom. I'm of that genre too, and that generation, to where I'm a little scared of technology, but I know I need to hop on the train, because that train's moving.
Yeah.
And either I hop on it, or I'm going to be waving into the caboose and saying goodbye to the train, and I'm going to get left behind. And there's probably some great efficiencies I can gain without, giving up my soul for just use a technology to become more efficient.
Yeah. You have on here, I'm gonna hit some points of this STAR model. You have strategy as a point on the STAR. So culture's at the center. You have strategy as a point on that STAR. And I'm sure you've thought about this, perhaps been asked this. You see this all the time, this saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Right.
But you have them working together. And what that saying would imply is, don't spend so much time on your strategy, spend your time on the culture.
Right.
How does that saying resonate with you when you hear that? Because you're obviously using both of those.
Right. I would say it goes back into, if you think your culture is at the center of everything you need to do organizationally, I would say the roadmap, when you look at that, saying this is the destination. So if we use a trip analogy, we're in vacation time. So if you're saying this is the destination, is really the culture. This is where we're going. And sometimes you may not be there just yet, but this is our aspirational culture, what we want to look like. What the roadmap to help you get from point A to point B, or the flight schedule or what have you, is really going to be your strategy.
Okay.
Because your strategy is going to take it, saying this is our culture, and our culture is driven by vision, mission, core values, if I can count with my fingers. And then the roadmap to help you get from point A to point B is going to be your strategy.
Okay.
Because most organizations should do If you don't do it and you're a business owner, I would really plead at least annually meet and talk about your strategic plan.
Mhm.
And you should be looking at that at least 1 to 2 year strategic plan and help to, get somebody to help to facilitate that. Don't do it internally. Use a third party to do that. Happy to help if you don't like
Why
me
use a
to.
third party?
Because everybody internally is going to have internal bias. They're going to be doing things either consciously or subconsciously to position the roadmap to look a certain way. And the one person in the company may say, I really want to go to the mountains and go that way. And the other person says, I really want to go by the coast and go that way. And so even if they think we're not going to be biased, I would still very, very heavily recommend use somebody who doesn't have skin in the game.
Yeah.
Use somebody who's going to be non-biased, that all I'm trying to do is get you from point A to point B. And you define what point B is. If I go to work for a new client or I go to work on a project, I'll always say, what does success look like from your perspective? What does a success outcome look like? And give me a couple of bullets. Don't give me 20, give me 3. Because I want to know what success is in your mind. And I said, I will help you get then from point A to point B. How I do it is up to me. And I may do some quirky things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I'll guarantee you that there's a high likelihood of success if you follow me, because I've done it for 30-something years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. It's funny you say that, because so my business partners and I, we meet quarterly.
Okay.
For a day to work on the business, so that we're not in the business. So it's away from the office. That's the whole thing. And I've told them before, I'm like, man, sometimes I leave those meetings and they're great, but I'm like, I'm so disappointed, because I want to approach those meetings as if I'm not a partner in the business, but I'm a management consultant. Because when you're a partner in the business, I feel like often I might not bring something up, or I'd bring it up a certain way. But if I was a management consultant, I'm just going to bring it up because I'm ignorant to the situation.
Right.
Why are y'all doing that? And you're questioning why, and what would you do that instead of just already knowing? You're just going to question it,
Right.
kind of from a point of ignorance in a good way.
Right.
And you have no skin in the game.
Right. And see, that's the key thing, because if your department or your function within the business is perhaps underperforming a little bit, chances are human nature is going to say, I'm not going to really bring it up unless somebody else does. Because I would say the classic line is, I'm not going to call my baby ugly.
Yes.
And how dare you call my baby ugly?
Yes.
That's hands off. I may say my baby looks a little bit weird.
Yeah.
But if you say it, though, them's fighting words.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
like,
so
so
good. Yeah.
So it's like, the human nature is going to say, I'm not going to magnify some of the issues that my group is struggling with. Or maybe your group has high turnover, or your group isn't meeting its financial performance goals. I'm going to be the last one that brings it up.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be looking in the mirror and say, part of the issue resides with me.
Yeah.
It'll be very contentious if somebody else on your team does that. Whereas that third-party consultant, I'm going to bring it up. And if this is going to if I'm going to step on a landmine and explode, we're going to talk about it. And we're going to facilitate this conversation. Even if it does create some awkwardness, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I have skin in the game that I want to be able to help you get to a success. But if there's some turbulence along that plane flight, that's okay by me, because we're going to work through the turbulence.
Yeah, yes, that is so good. I also think, well, in addition to what you just said in that situation, is if you are on the leadership team, you might not have as much grace for the other person in bringing things up, that if you are an outsider with no skin in the game,
Right.
you're going to have so much grace, because they're not bringing it up to be offensive.
Right.
So you're going to have so much grace. You're going to know that it's from a pure standpoint, as opposed to even if it's someone on the leadership team is bringing it up from a pure standpoint,
Right.
you will convince yourself that it is not.
Right.
And so then it's a higher likelihood that you would hold something against that person
Right.
and be offended.
Because you're going to have to see them tomorrow.
Exactly.
Whereas
And
chances
the next
are,
day.
if you bring in a third party that's objective, you're not going to see them tomorrow.
That's so good.
So
Yeah.
it just, again, and that's why I even say, like with succession planning, if a company's doing, one of the points in there around people is succession planning. And so there are thousands upon thousands of companies where folks like me are they're getting ready to exit. And they have not done a good job whatsoever of thinking about succession, because most people, even if they're 65, 72, they're like, oh, I'm going to be around forever. No, you're not. And something major may happen to you. Something major may happen to a loved one, to where you can no longer work successfully. You may be in a car accident. Somebody T-bones you. It's like having a succession plan is just good. It's a good business practice for any business. It doesn't matter if you have 25 people or 25,000 people.
Yeah.
Having a succession plan to know who are being groomed. One of them is just looking at strategic gaps, right? Are there strategic holes within our leadership team today that we need to fill? What is the pipeline of successors, plural, for each leadership team member? And then the other biggest bonus is who are the young guns? Who are the 30-somethings that we need to retain, and we need to challenge and develop aggressively? Who are those people? And if the company has 100 people or 200 people, chances are the CEO or president may not have a really good line of sight to who those people are.
Yeah.
He or she needs to get to know them, go have lunch with them, ask them, what do you think screwed up about the company? What thoughts do you have if you were if you were in my seat, what would you do? And I bet, again, that generation will tell you, well, now that you asked me the question, so-and-so, let me tell you the 5 things I would do if I was in your seat. And you may say, oh my gosh, nobody's actually had the guts to tell me that before. And it could be some really good feedback about things you need to do strategically to change the direction of the ship.
Yeah. It brings up 2 things in my head, Mark. One of them is yesterday you and I talked about, I'm thinking of succession, and I'm thinking of having an organization running optimally for when that takes place over the course of time. And I'm tying that back into a conversation you and I had before, which is having a repeatable process.
Right.
Producing a machine and having that be able to operate almost on autopilot, It reminds me of like operating systems like EOS or something like that.
Or scaling up or what have you,
So why are those, is that part of the model of processes and having a repeatable, why is that so critical?
It goes back to scaling. Every organization there are so many organizations that make it to $1 million of revenue. That number becomes much smaller that make it to $10 million of revenue. That number becomes much smaller to get to 25 and 50 million in revenue. Probably one of the biggest things that happens there, if that business is still an ongoing concern and doesn't get acquired, let's say, is because they have not figured out how to scale their processes. Every time they do it, it's like, well, let's try this new and creative way to do it. In our world, hiring should not be a process you wing every time you hire somebody. It doesn't matter if you hire 5 people a year or 50 people a year. You should have a very crisp process, and even just clearly defining what the role is and making sure the manager who actually manages that department defines what that role is. Because if you have a job description that's 5 years old, there's a good chance that job description is basically should be thrown in the trash can.
Yes.
So it goes back to those basics, and a job description does not equal a job posting. So I have a chapter on recruitment in the book. But even, yeah, job description does not equal job posting.
That's right.
Job posting is much more marketing focused. And ideally, you should have somebody in marketing write the job description for you, the job posting. Because there's some core things there, the core requirements, competency, sure. But a lot of it's got to have a lot more splash. A lot more, why do you want to come? Why do you, 25-year-old so-and-so with this magic degree, why do you want to come to work for us? What's fun about this place? Why are you going to find this engaging? And what are we going to do for you? Versus just something that's is going to taste like a mouthful of sand in your mouth. You got to make sure it's got some. It's got it's got to be, heavens forbid, it's got to be kind of cool and sexy.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to get people to apply, and that's what's going to get better candidate to apply. Which hopefully, again, through your recruiting process, which is well vetted and consistent, you will end up with better candidates who will make it forward as finalists.
So practically speaking, because a lot of the feedback on this book has been it's very practical in application. So when we speak practically, and we'll just take the interview process, you said, because you want a repeatable process, you want it to operate seamlessly. So what does that mean? Does that mean, okay, Charlie, you're responsible for talking about this core value and really diving into their work history. And Susie, you're responsible for thinking about culture fit and asking questions around that. Like, does that mean that people in the interview process have a specific responsibility that they're trying to vet out? Is that an example of the crispness?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Could be that, because some people then, especially if you're going to do some sort of a team interview, just to be efficient, because if you're interviewing for, identically for the same, there's 3 openings for the same position. Then just for speed and momentum to keep the candidates moving through the pipeline quicker, you may decide to do a tag team approach where you actually have 2 or 3 people interviewing simultaneously. The best thing to do is, because the worst thing you can do is go in there non-scripted, because there's going to be something, shoot, I should have interviewed around our core values. I should have interviewed around the core facets and the technical competency of the skill set. I should have been interviewing about I should have been focused a little more on our culture and why we have such, our benefits and why they're so awesome and blah, blah, blah. Because if you don't do that, then I'll guarantee you at the end of the interview, when you're looking at some finalists, oh shoot, we didn't find out from Susie about this. Oh yeah, I guess Jimmy, we didn't ask them that question. And if you wait too long and that process drags on, Jimmy and Susie are going to disappear, because they find other jobs, because good people can always find good jobs in any type of a job market. So part of it is even having structured interview questions.
Okay.
I even tell people take notes. Tell people you are going to take notes during the interview.
Okay.
Even if you're going to do it on your laptop or tablet, tell them, I'm not doing emails. I'm actually want to capture what you say, especially if you're going to interview 4 people on the same day. Because I won't remember what Jimmy said.
Yeah, it's all mixed
Susie.
up.
Right, so take notes, have structured questions you're going to ask to be efficient. Make sure you leave time for them to ask you a few questions. And then just so things like that, so every process around selection, you should follow a 3-step, 5-step process to get from point A to point B.
So this is process around selection, have it documented. This is how we do it. Onboarding, have it documented. This is how we do it. Offboarding, whether it's a termination or someone wants to do an exit interview because they've left for another opportunity, there is a process around doing it. So anything that involves human, and I would go a step further, not just human resources. I would go to the step of, your sales process should look like this. Let's operate on a system.
Right.
That's system
why,
scale people don't.
Right. Exactly. That's it. You hit the nail on it. Just like having a CRM system.
Yeah.
If the sales folks never put a darn thing in the CRM system, how great's your $50,000 CRM system? It's no good. It's just this blank thing that says nothing. How are things moving in the sales pipeline? Because there's lots of math around, you got to have this much activity, this many calls, this many touches for you to get to get a deal.
Okay.
And that's very scientific as to how we get from point A to point B, and what does our outbound marketing strategy look like.
Yeah, excellent.
So,
Yeah. So the other thing that you mentioned, so when you were talking about succession planning, and we'll probably try and start wrapping it up here,
sure.
it made me think of a system. And then you also talked about in succession planning, you've identified the 30-somethings who you think are going to take the organization on to the next level after you've decided to part ways or whatever the case may be. How do you, and I'm sure there should be a system around this, how do you develop that person? How do you identify something in them, but you got to develop them? I mean,
Right.
you know, in my head, I start thinking about, and maybe this question is completely selfish, and so be it. So hopefully other people will get something from
Sure.
it too.
No worries.
You know, but I'm like, man, how do you really develop someone to be leadership ready?
Right.
Is it, you know, go listen to these podcasts, read these books, let's talk about what is a methodology?
Right. It's no, great question. So I would say that because I've spent a lot of time doing this in my career. So part of it is really sitting down with developing an IDP, an individual development plan. The concept's been around for years. Nothing Mark invented. I wish I was again that smart, but I'm not. So, but an individual development plan is really, first of all, telling this person, we think you're really good at what you do. We want to continue to grow and challenge you. And we're gonna treat this game. I have one CEO, ironically, right up the road from where we are now. They talk about with succession planning, it's a game of chess. It's not a game of checkers. So in chess, and I'm really stink at chess, but it's a strategic thing. Sometimes you give up pawns to create another move because you're trying to get somebody to bite and take your pawn because you're trying to open up something else on the playing board. The correlation there is with your people. Sometimes you want them that you will ask them or tell them in some cases, you need to move laterally before you can move vertically. You need to go to finance or you need to go to marketing before, because if you want to be the head of sales or if you want to be the GM of the business function, your move is not going to be directly vertical. It's going to be lateral. It could look very disjointed if you're trying to map it out. But part of it's also around, are you interested in moving up in this organization? Asking this person point blank. And what would you love to do? What experiences would you love to have in the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months? And just ask them that question flat out. I said, oh my gosh, I would love to move here. First of all, they appreciate it that you say, you're important and we think you're really cool and we think you're really one of our most talented young people we want to grow. And then the other big thing they're going to do is they will start to think about, I jokingly say most people, and I think it's a real stat, most people put a lot more investment. They think a lot more, do a lot more research into the next car they're going to buy than their career. True statement.
Wow.
So most people will actually put hours and hours and hours, test drive after test drive after test drive, versus their career. And I'm like, okay, you're going to have a car, whatever time frame, 3 to 5 years, 2 years, 3, whatever if you're a car guy, then you always want to have something brand new and shiny. Versus your career. Most people they do not think intentionally about what do I need to do from a career development standpoint to move from point A to, I would love to be the CEO of a company 10 years down the road.
Wow.
And if you ask that person point blank, where do you see yourself going in your career? If you could line out your dream job, and the key thing is that as a business owner, you have to be comfortable to say, we are going to aggressively help you to develop and grow, knowing at some point you may actually leave the nest. And we're going to be thrilled for you because you know what? There's a chance you may come back to us at some point. Because in some cases, we may not have an open opportunity for you, and you're already saying, I'm getting bored stiff in this role, and a high potential is bored stiff is not a good thing. Therefore, you may just say, and ironically, an Ericsson or a Pepsi are great examples of those. they have left, they've had so many people leave. And most of the time, their CEOs would say the one thing they're the most proud of at the company is we grow talent here.
Mm.
We create great leaders who will be successful whether they stay here or whether they leave here. They're going to be successful, and along their 40-year career, they played we played a snippet
Yep.
during that 40-year career, and they may come back, as saying, shoot, I came back and now I'm running the place, but I had to leave for 10 years to get the experience base, or to run an international unit somewhere in Asia or in Europe before I could be ready to come back and be able to do this much bigger job, which was really my goal.
Yeah, it makes me think of that saying, I was always told that, leave a job better than when you got it.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite of that is true from the company and employee's perspective. It's like, hopefully, if that employee's going to leave, they're leaving better than when they came here.
Sure.
And that's your responsibility as an organization to make them better.
Right.
Whether they leave or they don't leave. I think of that character or that cartoon strip where it's the CFO and the CEO having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And, the CFO is like, we got to give our people some training. And the CEO is like, yeah, but what if we train them and they leave?
Right.
And the CFO says, well, what if we don't and they stay?
Right. Exactly. Right.
How dangerous is that? Like, let's train them. And if they leave, maybe they will be a boomerang, but make sure that they leave better than when they came. Just like their goal is to leave that position better than when they got it. That's really good. Okay. So one quick last question for you.
Okay.
As we wrap up, and for those people, again, this is Mark's book, People Are Your Profit. Again, Amazon. Mark is fantastic. Please take a look at it. You're advising a company right now, okay? And what are the 2 or 3 questions? Someone's listening to this, and they're like, "Well, where do I start? What are the 2 questions that I need to ask about my culture?" So that I can start really, really trying to be objective about my organization and what I need to do next. What would they ask themselves?
Wow. Well, I'm gonna cheat with that question just slightly.
Okay.
So if you allow me, but I would say if I ask the business owner CEO, I would like you to define your culture in 1 or 2 sentences, or just strictly with adjectives. If I asked you that question and I asked everybody on your leadership team the same question, would there be a correlation, a high level of correlation between what you say and they say?
That's good. Yeah.
And if they say, or if they take a deep swallow or a big pause, they say, I have no idea. I ask a question. I do in some engagements, I do an HR assessment to start with. I start out with one of the questions I ask them. So do you have core values? I ask them about culture and define it. And then the next question is, so do you have core values? They say, oh, of course we have core values. I said, how many core values do you have? Oh, well, we have 5. And so I said, well, what are they? And I've had some people just flat out say, I have no idea.
Wow.
Because we don't talk about them. I said, well, why is it that you don't talk about it? I said, well, we just did it as an exercise because the boss read a book or read a magazine, Management by Magazine. They went on a business trip or a conference. They read this, we got to have core values. Well, kumbaya, everybody has core values. Yep. We have this planning session. And then we put them on a shelf, or they're sitting there by the coffee pot. But I have no idea what they are. So do you think that's... And when you talk about your core values being important to an employee, what do you think the message is you're sending? Well, probably they're not that important. I said, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things I would ask. The next thing I would ask is, so when you think about the people side of your business, whatever that looks like to you, the benefits, the payroll, blah, 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 do you think on the whole, are most of the things you're doing, especially if you have, for instance, like a disciplinary issue, you're talking about termination, are you handling most of this conversation? Are you doing it in a reactive fashion or a proactive fashion? And I would imagine most of them will say reactively. When we have a fire with a person, we have to figure out how to extinguish that fire, whatever that looks like. So, well, what if you thought about this more proactively? And you actually started to think more intentionally about your your human capital as truly capital. And the subtitle in the book is Transform Your Biggest Expense into Your Biggest Asset. So how do you take this huge expense you have in your people and actually leverage that into becoming a huge asset and ideally a strategic advantage for you?
Yeah, man. Mark, that's so good. That is so good. Yeah, I so much appreciate. I feel like I feel like this is cheap for me because I'm sitting here going, oh, okay, maybe we do that well, but there's so many things that we need to work on, and it's endless, right? It's the
Sure.
I'm going to steal from Simon Sinek. It's the infinite game. It's never ending.
Right. No, because you're working in a changing world, a
Yes.
changing ecosystem, and your organization is fluid.
Yeah.
And next month it's going to look a little different than it does this month.
Yeah. It truly
And
does.
so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
so that's why being a leader is tough. And there's no magical recipe to it, but for most, hopefully that creates excitement versus that you could either be scared to death or you could be really excited, and hopefully you seem like the type who would be really excited by the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here just thinking to myself, all right, I got to get to work right now. Let's go. So,
well, you just got back from Houston, so you can probably take tonight.
Yeah,
off.
I know. That's true. That's true. That's a good statement. Yeah, I better not, but that's what I want to do.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, David.
Yeah,
It's been
we
a
really
pleasure.
appreciate. To our audience, hey, listen, if you need help, Mark's information will be on the podcast notes. We'll be tagging him on LinkedIn. Go look at his book. He is incredibly helpful. And just having this conversation for me has shown a light in so many areas that I want to work on for our organization. I hope it is you too. And that if you need a follow-up phone call with him, don't hesitate to reach out. And until next time.
If you're looking for the next step in your career or the missing piece for your team, Unity Search has you covered. Whether it's finance and accounting, tax services, information technology, or human resources, Unity Search is here for you with experienced and dedicated hiring professionals. Reach out today and take the next step. Unity Search, placing you first.